Is it smart to have a high IQ but to ignore our emotional intelligence? The ability to recognize, understand, and manage our emotions in positive ways, to relieve stress, communicate effectively, empathize with others, overcome challenges, and diffuse conflict are aspects of what we call emotional intelligence. Listen, learning to manage our emotional intelligence is actually very important. You see, God created us with emotions and as emotional beings. And He gave us the ability through the Holy Spirit to control these emotions. This ability is something commonly referred to as self-control, or in the King James Version, temperance. God has given us His own emotion governing spirit. And by relying on that spirit, we can have discipline and set internal boundaries over our emotions. So self-control is not something that occurs naturally, but it is something that can be worked on, which, by the way, is the work of the Holy Spirit and not our own works. But of course, we have to allow Him to do that work in us. Take a look at Romans 12, verses 1 to 2.
It's time for family application. Why did God give us the gift of emotion? Simply put, it is to add beautiful colors to our lives. But Satan tempts us to turn them into our gods by allowing our emotion to control us and to flow and govern by the Spirit of God. In the Garden of Eden, in the first story of humanity, mankind was forced into exile because of their failure to control their desires. Proverbs 25:28 puts it bluntly, a man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. The stark reality is that out of control emotions do not produce God-honoring results. Instead, they negatively affect society, our relationship, and other areas of our lives. They change the overall tone of our lives, they change how we see things and react, and even disturb our physical well-being. But when we control our emotions by the power of the Holy Spirit, we live and enjoy happier days and fuller lives.
So this month we're talking about emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence, just to reiterate, is simply the ability to recognize, control, and manage our emotions in order to reduce stress, diffuse conflict, empathize with people, and in relationship building. God created us emotional beings and He has given us all of the tools in order to manage those emotions. But I mean, we're people and we have challenges. So it's not to beat up yourself if there are problems, because in managing emotions especially is important with dealing with stressful situations. What are some stressful situations we're dealing with right now? Navigating change. Hi, pandemic. Not having enough resources as the effect of the pandemic.
Right.
Exams, meetings, and work. A lot of things cause us to get stressed out and our emotions get affected. And we have to remember that God gave us the breastplate of righteousness that guards our heart, guards our emotions. So we have to be cognizant of that, hence the ability to recognize it and control it. And we spoke about self-control today. And it's just point to note, because we will do it throughout the weeks, managing our emotions is not something we can do on our own. We need the Holy Spirit.
Yep.
We need the work and the move of the Holy Spirit in our lives. That spirit man to manage that soul man in us, in our emotions. Because when you try to do it for yourself, and I've tried to do it for myself, you feel all the time. It is not something we could control in ourselves, whether it's our emotions as a whole or self-control. And we're doing self-control today. So let's get in quickly with the question. Why is it important to have self-control in a time of pandemic? Why is it important that we have self-control in a pandemic?
All right, so we need to think about, of course, first the pandemic.
Yeah.
When you hear pandemic, you're already thinking, all right, I gotta wash my hands all the time, sanitize, keep a specific distance. You know the drill, you get it, you understand, but why are we doing it? One, yes, for our own protection, but also we're being thoughtful about the well-being and the safety of others. So then what happens when people are not on our backs about it? When they're not saying, okay, guys, remember sanitize, remember wash your hands. What causes us to remember to practice these precautions? It would be self-control. So by practicing self-control, that helps us to live out the commandment found in Matthew chapter 22, verse 39, which very simply says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And continuing with, of course, the pandemic, for example, schools, the teaching has been moved to a virtual platform. And what people notice is that the students who are able to exhibit a higher self-control will be the ones who are able to study more, remain focused on their schoolwork, even with distractions at home, so they will yield better results. Yeah.
And the last one that we have, before you go off to your family discussion, and we just want to reiterate that it's a family discussion, and a lot of things are happening right now in the world, and you see it in the world when you look at the news where people are not controlling their emotions. Things like domestic violence is crazy. You go out the road in the grocery, by the gas station. I had an incident, well, not with me, thank God, with somebody else, where somebody just couldn't wait for somebody else to drive up to the pump. And it's just emotions just flaring
Crazy,
all over the
yeah.
place because people are not controlling it. And it's worth the discussion in your home and with your friends. So just our last point that we have, during the pandemic, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear of if we could contract the disease, if there's fear with things people are saying you could do to not contract the disease, there's fear with that too. So either way, your mortality is coming into question, and people are dealing with a lot of fear, and we have to look at recognize what is feeding our fear, and we have the ability to cut it out. And we talk about this a lot. If you're watching news like 15 hours a day and it's just a bunch of negative things, or on our phones everybody's on a group chat and it's just things coming at you all the time, and it's feeding your fear. And we have to have that ability to say no, have that control, ask God, ask the Holy Spirit to guide us and in telling us what to look at, what to read, what to watch, and it will happen because it will give us that strength to control it, self-control, self-management. We will be able to and deal with these things in an effective, healthy way. Dealing with emotions, suppressing emotions is a very unhealthy way of dealing with it. We have to recognize it and yield to the Holy Spirit to help us, because it's not something that happens naturally, because something that happens a lot and we're noticing it with emotions, but that's for next week, is anger. And we need to talk about anger. So God's willing, we will see you all next week and get to discussing it.